Richard Day said in 1969. There was a discussion, Dr. Dunnigan said, of terrorism. Terrorism would be used widely in Europe and in other parts of the world. Terrorism at that time was thought not to be necessary in the United States, but it could become necessary if the United States did not move rapidly enough into accepting the new system. Truth cannot be silenced forever. 9/11 was an inside job simply to trigger the sequence of events that we're still seeing unfold. Now, they have their 9/11, they have their problem, and the solution was picking off the countries on the list from September 2000. First of all, they go into Afghanistan and then Iraq. And Iraq, you had Tony Blair in Britain and Boy George Bush in America. And we now know, some of us said it at the time, wrote it at the time, they lied to us, lied for those that control them, about weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. Why? Because the list said, invade Iraq, remove Saddam Hussein. There was no reason to do it at that time, so they made one up. It is that simple. And let us not forget, mainstream media who ridicule anyone who even questions 9/11, that the very same people, not the same agencies, the same people that told us there were weapons of mass destruction in Iraq to justify a catastrophic war and all that's followed, were the same people that told us the official story of 9/11. And yet they accept one, they were lied to now, but still accept 100% what the same people told them about that pivotal event in the transformation of human society. So, Iraq down, now Libya. Now note, by the time Libya, another one on the list, is ticked off, Bush is gone. Now it's Obama, a Democrat, the other party. Blair's gone. Now it's David Cameron, a conservative, and the other party. And Clinton's in there. But they're picking off the same list. Why? Because that force that controls whoever's in power is driving the whole thing. And so you had this situation where they said that Gaddafi was killing his own people, so to protect them from violence, they bombed them from the air and destroyed the place, turned it into the Stone Age. It's kind of crazy now. Talk to people who've been there, it's unbelievable. It's just mass violence. So what did they do? This is how they do it. They fund and arm freedom fighters, and they attack the regime, in this case Gaddafi. At this point, politicians in the West, Western media, when the target regime, in this case Gaddafi, starts shooting back, they can't get to a microphone quick enough. He's killing his own people! So send the boys in. And that's how it works. And then Libya down, Syria, and they played the same game there exactly. But a spanner's been thrown in the works to that, as I'll come to. So this is former French Minister for Foreign Affairs, Roland Dumas, on French television, talking about Syria. He said, I'm going to tell you something. I was in England, no, not America, England, one of the major centers of global manipulation, Britain. I'm going to tell you something. I was in England 2 days before the violence in Syria, 2 years rather, before the violence in Syria, on other business. I met with top British officials who confessed to me that they were preparing something in Syria. This was in Britain, not in America. Britain was going or organizing an invasion of rebels into Syria. They even asked me, he said, although I was no longer Minister for Foreign Affairs, if I would like to participate. Naturally, I refused. This operation goes way back. It was prepared, preconceived, and planned. He goes on. This operation goes way back. It was prepared, preconceived, and planned in the region. It is important to know that this Syrian regime has a very anti-Israeli stance. Consequently, and I have this from the former Israeli Prime Minister who told me, we'll try to get on with our neighbors, but those who don't agree with us will be destroyed. And if we're going to understand Israel and why this sliver of land of 8 million people has such an impact on the world, we have to understand that actually it's just the fiefdom of the Rothschilds. Israeli people living in Israel, they're just pawns to these people and don't realize. Just fiefdom of the Rothschilds. And the idea all along was to take Palestine and get the Palestinians out, take the whole place over, all orchestrated from the start by the House of Rothschild, still being done so. And this week, those of us who have said over the years, the plan from the start was to rid the land of Palestinians. They don't want a solution. And this week, a document was declassified from the time of the Six-Day War in 1967, soon after, which reveals in official documents the strategy all along has been to suffocate the Gaza Strip and get rid of Palestinians out of Palestine. And with Trump in power, he gets what the hell he likes. And it's interesting that a leaked email sent by Colin Powell, who was Secretary of State at the time of 9/11, it was leaked, an email from March 2015. And Powell revealed that Israel has 200 nuclear weapons. And apparently all of them, he said, had been aimed at Iran. This is a nuclear weapons program that Israel won't admit to, and America, as part of official policy, does not ask about. So, if you're going to keep invading countries, your target countries, like Iraq, etc., then people are going to go, hold on a second. What do they keep invading countries for? So you do it in a way that gets people in that country to get rid of the regime for you, but under your control. And this is what the Arab Spring was all about. This guy, George Soros, operates a network globally called the Open Society Foundations. Their specialization is manipulating revolutions, particularly ones given the name of a color, and the revolutions of the people, it's called, like Arab Spring. And very recently, it was announced that he had transferred $18 billion to this Open Society Foundation network. So obviously, there's an enormous plan unfolding, or plan to unfold ahead, using that network which he controls. And as well as the Soros network, which cannot be overestimated in its influence, more about him as we go along, there is this document from US Special Forces Unconventional Warfare Strategy, November the 30th, 2010. This is just before the Arab Spring started in Tunisia, and it describes their plan exactly as it unfolded. It says, the US military's unconventional warfare strategy requires that target state population perceptions are first groomed into accepting an armed resurrection, using propaganda and political and psychological efforts to discredit the government, creating local and national agitation, helping organize boycotts, strikes, and other efforts to suggest public discontent before beginning the infiltration of foreign organizers and advisors for foreign propaganda, material, money, weapons, and equipment. Exactly what has happened in the Middle East after that document in September 2000. It goes on. If retaliation by the target government occurs, the resistance can exploit the negative consequences to garner more sympathy and support from the population by emphasizing the sacrifices and hardship the resistance is enduring on behalf of the people. He's killing his own people. And Henry Kissinger said, it is not a matter of what is true that counts, but what is perceived to be true. It's all about manipulating perception so that people will support. You look at perception. What is perception? It dictates what we think, what we don't think, what we'll challenge, what we won't challenge, what we'll support, what we won't support. Perception is everything, and that's the battleground. And how powerful perception manipulation is. This was a poll in America where 30% in the poll wanted to bomb Agrabah, which is a fictional town in Aladdin. That's how easy it is. And now, Mr. Populist man, Mr. Anti-establishment man comes into power. It's all going to change now. And the demonization of these countries has continued under him. All countries on the same list. And Lebanon. I say in my new book, Everything You Need to Know But Have Never Been Told, which I only kind of finished very few weeks ago. Watch for Lebanon being demonized, because it's on the list, and they'll come for that. Look what's happening with Lebanon now, suddenly out of nowhere. Israel calls on Arab states to befriend Israel and team up against Iran. They want Iran. This is where it's all building. And this new crown prince, again, I mentioned him in the new book and his background. This crown prince in Saudi Arabia, who's imprisoned all these billionaires and fellow princes to get control of Saudi Arabia, he is completely owned by Israel and the United States. And that's why his rhetoric now is, we must deal with Iran. It's all a script. It's all a movie script. It is not a random series of events. And where they want it to lead, and it doesn't have to, if we get our asses in gear, they want it to lead to World War III. You look at the 3 world wars. First of all, the status quo as it was before World War I was destroyed by World War I. They then change the status quo and they move on to the Second World War. They destroy the new status quo. And now they want to destroy this status quo and impose another one. And it was all described in a letter alleged to come from this man called Albert Pike, in a letter in 1871, according to a Canadian naval intelligence officer. This guy, Albert Pike, was a major Freemason, very high Freemason, sovereign Grand Commander. And in this letter, which was revealed by this intelligence agent in the 1950s, he described 3 world wars. Now, he described the First World War accurately, described the Second World War accurately, but it only came to light through this guy in the 1950s. So the first 2 wars, forget them, not relevant to accuracy. So we've only got the Third World War left. And what he said would happen is that there would be a conflict between what he called political Zionism and the Islamic world, which would draw in, like a vortex, more and more countries until it was a world conflict. He said that in the run-up to this Third World War, they would, quote, unleash the nihilists on the world. And nihilism is defined as a political belief or action that advocates or commits violence or terrorism without discernible constructive goals. ISIS and these other terrorist groups to a T. And I would say it also fits this Antifa, who are very much in the control of people like George Soros, as I'll come to. And so we reached the point. I said in the 1990s that the plan was the Third World War involving China. And here we have the Pentagon now listing Russia and China as top global threats and saying that they must increase the budget to meet the threat. And of course, Russia, out of nowhere, until very relatively recently, was being left alone. But now, the demonization of Russia is almost laughable. Look, Russia wants war. Look how close it put its country to our military bases. It obviously wants trouble. The NATO war machine. And what it is, it's simple. Demonize, destroy. Demonize, destroy. Demonize, prepare the public mind to destroy. This is how it works. This is why they're demonizing Russia now. Russia has not seen such an amassing of hostile military forces on its borders since 1941. And Lithuania and Estonia signed milestone deals on status of US troops on their soil. In other words, they're being occupied increasingly by US troops. And the propaganda for 2-year-olds, it's the Russians are coming. When in fact, NATO is coming onto the borders of Russia. And Hermann Goering, of course, a famous Nazi, had it right when he said, the people can always be brought to the bidding of the leaders. That is easy. All you have to do is tell them they are being attacked and denounce the pacifists for lack of patriotism and exposing the country to danger. It works the same in any country. That's how the Nazis worked. That's how these Nazis are working. And I'm not saying Putin is a Sunday school teacher or anything like, but the idea that he's Stalin who wants to roll the Russian military across Europe is such a joke. It's unbelievable. And this is the Third World War agenda made simple. It's the Russians. Everything is the frickin' Russians. I've got a cold. It's the Russians. I've got a flat. It's the Russians. I burnt the toast. It's the Russians. Can't trust them. Russia hacked the US election. Ah! Evidence. Bugger all. Made it up. These are declassified files that have just come out, which are involved from 1962 again, this guy Lemnitzer of Operation Northwoods, and they are plans to fake a Russian attack, blame it on the Soviet Union to justify a war. This is not new. Those two countries could work together, but they're not meant to work together, and so they're driven apart on purpose. We have a military government increasingly in the Trump administration, and we have, sleep well, a man called Mad Dog Mattis, who is deciding military policy and direction in the United States, the biggest military on earth by a mile. And if you go for Iran, you get China and Russia, and the three come together. And that's the plan. That's where they want to take it. So the next thing is create the enemy. How do we get there to the Hunger Games Society? And this is a world exclusive. This is ISIS headquarters. It's been found. It's been... because you have to create an enemy. Now, what we call ISIS and all these other groups came out of the Pentagon through the Mujahideen and the Taliban in Afghanistan, through Al-Qaeda, through to Islamic State, Boko Haram in Africa as well. Zbigniew Brzezinski talked to the media in France, it's a news magazine, some years ago now, and he admitted that when he was National Security Advisor to President Jimmy Carter, they funded into existence something called the Mujahideen in Afghanistan, specifically to attack the Soviet satellite regime in Kabul, Afghanistan, to force the Soviet Union to invade Afghanistan, and in his words, give the Soviet Union their Vietnam. It cost 1 million Afghan lives, but these guys don't give a damn. And from the Mujahideen, became morphed into the Taliban, which morphed into Al-Qaeda. And the former British Foreign Minister, a guy called Robin Cook, said just before he died of a heart attack out of nowhere that Al-Qaeda means the base or the database, because Al-Qaeda was created from the database by the CIA in America, from the database of Mujahideen fighters that they had on the database to fight against the Russians. This is how it works. You've got the hidden hand in the shadows coming down through secret societies, through military intelligence, through terror group leaders, and then you've got the rank and file terrorists who haven't got a freaking clue why they're doing what they're doing or what the ultimate masters are. They are basically idiots, programmed idiots, very dangerous and deeply not just misguided, but crazy, lunatic idiots, but idiots all the same. It's not coming from them. This is a guy called Saeed Ramzi. It's not his real name for obvious reasons. He was an undercover reporter for French TV, and he infiltrated a a cell of terrorists in Europe who were supposed to be carrying out terrorist attacks in Europe. And this is what he said. The militants had very little understanding of Islam. They were fast food jihadis. One of the main lessons was that I never saw any Islam in this affair. No will to improve the world, only lost, frustrated, suicidal, easily manipulated youths who had been promised a palace, a winged horse of gold and rubies in the afterlife if they would take part in these terrorist attacks and suicide bombings. And what we're looking at is not Islam. We're looking at something called Wahhabism, which is the creation, as I explain in some detail in this new book, the creation of the British Empire and the House of Saud. This is why the House of Saud was the immediate creator, with Western money as well, and aid and weapons, of ISIS. And if you look at ISIS and Saudi Arabia and how they work, the only difference between the two is ISIS is perceived as a US enemy and Saudi Arabia is perceived, shockingly, as a US ally. Everything else is the same, including beheading people. And declassified Pentagon report, US created ISIL as a tool against Assad. Create the enemy, then you can get the excuse to go into a country. US effectively siding with Al-Qaeda in desire to get rid of Assad, former UK ambassador to Syria. Merchants of death, Obama, Clinton run weapons to ISIS from Libya, say intelligence documents. Hacked emails prove Hillary armed jihadis in Syria, including ISIS. And this guy was about to go into court on charges of supplying weapons to Libyan rebels. And before he went into court, he said, if I go in the witness box, I'm going to reveal Hillary Clinton's part in it. She was Secretary of State, of course. And they let him go and drop the charges, and off he went to go on with his life. Huge stash of US-made weapons found in ISIS-controlled territory in Syria on purpose. This is an organization called Action on Armed Violence. They found that 1.45 million guns were supplied by the US to Afghanistan and Iraq between 2001 and 2015, and only 3% of those weapons have been accounted for. Where did the others go? Well, it's obvious where they went. These are the flags of the real ISIS, created to justify all that's gone on in the Middle East, create the enemy and justify a war and a conflict. But this guy came in, Putin and the Russian Air Force, and they threw a spanner in the works. All these militaries were getting nowhere. ISIS was continuing to head to Damascus. He comes in, or the Russian military come in the Air Force, supporting the Assad military, and suddenly ISIS starts getting swept back. Why? Because they weren't frickin' trying. That's why. And as the Russians have removed ISIS from most of Syria, they're still trying to justify getting rid of Assad through military means by lying about the use of chemical weapons on his own people, when there's absolutely no need and every need for him not to do that, given that he would know he was giving them an excuse to do what he knows they want to do.